Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, longtime friend of the show. Spent 4 years in the House, is now on, I think, his 10th year in the Senate. He's also been putting out federal fumbles for a lot of years. Hello, Senator. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I still need to get you to sing the song Oklahoma at some point when I come on board.
When my voice is better. Senator, you got to stay in the Senate because I don't want you on the radio. I always say that. Federal fumbles. Did Doge know about it before they started doging? I hope they did.
You know what? I think they did because several of the ideas that Elon Musk has actually put out in the last couple of weeks have been things directly out of my federal fumble books in the past, which I'm great with that. We have said all along as a team, I don't care how they get done. They just need to actually get done.
So, Senator, you're on Finance Committee. If you were to guess how much Doge could uncover and either not spend, rescind, or get Congresses to cooperate, how much waste, fraud, and abuse do you think there is?
We are plus $1 trillion in total loss that could be changed and could be turned down. Now, it would be hard and people would feel it, but we would be able to work through it. What Doge can actually identify and what Doge can actually get done is two different things. There are things that will take legislative action because Congress put that in place and needs to be unwound by Congress, but there's inefficiencies in just the payment systems and the structures. And the easiest way to be able to say it is if you buy something from a town that you don't normally travel to, your credit card company immediately texts you and says, hey, is this really you? In the federal government, the payment system, we know of $100 billion just in Medicare, Medicaid, and improper payments that we don't have any connection to at all. So that one program, there's improper payments of $100 billion and no one's chasing it.
Now, you see, that's massive, but it also makes me think, do we spend a lot of time on, for example, in the new edition of Federal Fumbles, which you can get over at Senator Lankford's website, there's $2 billion that we sent to the Taliban. Right. And I hear a lot of people say, well, it's only $2 billion. Actually, it adds up, doesn't it?
It does. A billion here, a billion there, and it's real money at some point. Yeah, $2 billion to the Taliban. We also deal with things like the federal agencies. We've now got 17 agencies in the federal government that they're using 25% or less of their floor space of actually their office space. So that means we're paying for 75% of empty buildings, empty desks, phone lines, everything else that's set up for there. No business would ever function that way. So that's an area Doge could step in immediately and say, we're not going to do that. That doesn't take an act of Congress to do it. This is something they can already identify, the administration can engage on and fix.
Now, Senator, I began the show today by doing a brief course in independent agencies and the direct frontal attack on them by the president's executive order yesterday. He's trying to corral independent agencies. Justice Gorsuch, in his book, Overruled, says we don't even know how many agencies we have, but we got at least 50, quote, independent agencies. Do you welcome that approach, an executive order saying every independent agency will put in a GS-15 Schedule C as a liaison with the White House?
Yep. I not only welcome that, I just about stood on a chair and cheered yesterday when that came out last evening. That is something I've pushed for years. My simple question to every independent agency that comes before Congress is to get them to answer one simple question. You are independent of who? Who are you independent of? Because it's not of Congress, because Congress created them. It's not of the White House, because there's not two executive branches in our Constitution. There's one executive branch, and there's one legislative branch, and there's one judiciary. So they're not independent of all. There's not a fourth branch of government. They're dependent. They're within the structure of it. So I know some of these entities like to think that they're a total fourth branch of government and they're not accountable to anyone, but that's just not true. And what the president's asking for is not unrealistic. It's saying when you actually produce a new regulation, they've got to go through the same process that every other agency does to create a regulation. They can't just create a new regulation demanded of the American people when they're literally an unaccountable independent agency. They are dependent and they're a part of the structure.
Now, Senator Lankford, I'm aware that at least two members of the court listen to the program every day. And right now, I assume they're listening and they're driving home because it's cold and they left early. Do you want them to take up the question of whether a case called Humphrey's Executor, but it really goes to who runs the independent agencies and who can be fired? Do you want them to revisit that? Because that was a 9-0 case supporting the idea of, quote, independent agencies back in 1935.
So the most simple way to say this is we're not changing what is quote-unquote an independent agency. We're just trying to answer the question of how far does their independence go. Their independence doesn't create a fourth branch of government. Congress created them to be able to say make your own non-political decisions. But when they're creating regulations, they were not doing that in the 1930s. This is a modern-day creation. If they're creating regulations, that should go through the same process as everyone else goes through. That simple question needs to be clarified. That should be a 9-0 decision the other direction.
Now, Senator, in terms of the Finance Committee on which you serve, the budget bill doesn't come out of you. It comes out of Senator Graham. But if it ever makes it to a budget resolution, your committee will have jurisdiction on the tax provisions of it.
That's correct.
Is there any way to foresee whether or not all of the Trump tax cuts will be extended?
We're going to extend most of them, if not all of them. Now, there's several of them that we'll actually have to go through and make changes on. So let me give you, for instance, the bonus depreciation is one of the areas that I work on a lot. That is actually diminishing and fading away right now. Every year it's 10 or 20% less each year on that. If we're going to make that a permanent tax policy, which is what we want to be able to do, it's set a number that's not constantly diminishing. So there are some changes that'll be out there like that, but we want to lock down what are the small business rates. The corporate rates are all set, but the S-corps are not, and the small businesses are not. Partnerships are not. So we need to be able to get those locked down so they're predictable for those small businesses to be able to operate, as well as for all the individual rates for every single bracket. And as my Democrat colleagues like to say, this was a bill only about the billionaires. That is 100% not true. Every single tax bracket is changed, and if this bill expires, every single bracket goes up. So we've got to be able to resolve that.
So the subchapter S corps especially just sat up and they said, bravo, I am one of them. And that needs to be extended, or I have to do different things to my business.
Yeah.
And I need to know fairly quickly. When do you anticipate? And I'm not a advocate of one bill or two bills. I don't care provided it gets done. When do you think it gets done?
Yeah, and I don't care one bill or two bills. The process is not as important as the product at the end of it. There's a lot of different routes to be able to get to it. Our target is to have it done by this summer, so it is complete, so people have got time. IRS has the time to be able to actually put out the regulations based on it, to be able to make that ready for the end of the year, and so that CPAs don't intensely hate us when we finish this in December.
Now, is there a chance that additional revenue will be found? And I'm a big advocate of sin taxes because I'm in California right now. There's marijuana being sold everywhere. No federal tax. It's illegal under federal tax. Is there any revenue enhancements on anyone's mind?
Right now, there's a big pile of tax questions that are sitting on the table. Let me give you a for instance on this. Do we continue to allow people that drive EVs? A lot of those are in California. Those electric vehicles pay no road tax. Everybody else does. But if you're an electric vehicle, you don't. So that's a question that's out there to say, does that actually get resolved? In fact, right now, everyone that's buying a new electric vehicle, they get a $7,500 tax credit for buying it, and then they pay no tax to actually drive it. That may be an area that needs to get fixed, and there may be multiple other areas that are like that to be able to look at. If you want to deal with alcohol, you talked about the sin tax. There's one tax rate if you're vodka. There's a lower tax rate if you're pickled vodka. Maybe that should just be one tax rate.
I think you're onto something. I want to recommend everyone go over to James Lankford at the Senate, senate.gov, find federal fumbles. There's a lot to cut. And I hope whatever the reconciliation comes along, they give the president the authority to do just that. Senator James Lankford, thank you. Follow him on X at Senator Lankford.